I felt my son's wedding stop breathing the moment my grandson gripped my sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa, check under the table." One folded note waited in the dark, 5 ugly words that told a server to add sesame to a child's plate. Betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it slides across linen and calls itself a misunderstanding. In that instant, I learned where my family stood. Image on one side, a 7-year-old's life on the other. I chose the child, and everything unraveled from there. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back, be part of the experience. If a moment grabs you, powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with the timestamp and your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate most. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. Charleston's old timber knows how to hold a summer evening. The ballroom floor, polished to a river's sheen, breathed back the gold leaking in from the Ashley, and the windows were cracked just enough to pipe in the brackish air that smells like history left in the sun. A string of Edison bulbs made a second ceiling over the chandeliers, and a small band threaded banjo across violin until it sounded like civility itself. I paused under the doorframe to feel the grain beneath my shoes, a boat builder's habit I never broke, then walked in with the quiet of a man who doesn't want to test the luck of a fragile piece. The tables wore champagne linen and centered monograms in ink that tried too hard. Place cards perched like little flags on a map of alliances, and every server spoke in that soft Carolina register that adds sugar to a sentence. The Low Country menu, written in looping cursive on a blackboard near the bar, ran down the usual parade. Shrimp and cornmeal, collards slick with pot liquor, skillet cornbread shining with butter, pecan pie that could start a war. I felt the old alertness rise in my chest the way a tide finds a dock piling, the way a man who has kept children alive through years of ordinary danger glances twice at ingredients others consider decoration. Noah sat beside me, small and solemn in a bow tie that refused to lie flat, the wooden truck I'd carved for him anchored under one palm. I'd cut that truck from a salvaged keel, oak that had known storms, so every time I touched it I remembered that wood can be stubborn and still take a shape. I traced the bevel with a thumb and told myself that steadiness could be learned like a joint. Measure, mark, cut true, and when you have to, shim the gap so the world doesn't whistle through. Across the room, my son circled like a polished satellite. Caleb had found a cologne that could whisper expensive without shouting. His hair shone with an effort I recognized as fear-wearing confidence. He shook hands, laughed a breath too long, adjusted his cufflinks as if they might win him a contract. There are smudges only a father sees, the edge where charm turns into labor, the set of a jaw that hides a tremor. I watched him bend toward a donor, then a friend, then a cousin, and the distance between us felt less like a choice than a tradition we'd both inherited and never questioned. Ariana made her entrance on the waltz's downbeat, a square-neck lace gown drawn in straight from a magazine, posture like a practice statement. The smile landed where it should, and it stayed where it landed, untroubled by thought. I offered mine, smaller, the kind you can retract without leaving a stain. People will tell you that eyes don't lie. I've learned they do, but not in the same direction twice. Joe slid into the empty chair at Noah's far side with the efficiency of an ICU nurse and the warmth of a sister who means it. She kept her voice low, her eyes higher than her smile, and thumbed open a marker. On a cocktail napkin, she made a quick ledger. Yes to plain greens, no to sesame, check labels, ask twice. She slipped the napkin under the edge of Noah's plate the way a builder slips a brace under a sagging beam. Casual, decisive, necessary. Noah nudged the truck until the little wooden wheels clicked against the linen. The sound made a private metronome that steadied me more than the band. A server hovered with a tray of bourbon and told me I wore a fine suit. "I'll stick with iced tea," I said, and when he faded into another orbit, I felt a small victory bloom where the first sip might have burned. There are nights when you know you can't spare any part of your attention, and this was one of those. Vigilance has no romance in it. It's mostly inventory and restraint. Evelyn used to say, "Look beneath the surface." I heard it the way you hear a harbor bell in fog, steady, not loud, persistent enough to orient a man. She taught me it at the boatyard, running her fingers along a hull where water had licked the paint thin. I'd tap the ribs and pretend I could hear the future crack. She'd smile and say, "You don't have to hear it to know it's there." Widowhood arrives as a subtraction that keeps subtracting, but some things stay deposited in the account. Her sentence has been earning interest for years. Chairs whispered against old pine as people drew close to the table and to one another. Glass made small music. Linen held starch, the way a good sail holds wind. I cataloged the room with the habit of a man who has rebuilt more than one structure after a storm. Not suspicion, exactly. More like attention at a resolution others find exhausting. I am slow to foreclose on hope, but I am even slower to ignore a seam. Caleb threw me a glance from across the room. I gave him one back that I meant as blessing. The same trees that give you lumber also make shade, and sometimes a man forgets how to stand where it's cooler. I wanted to clap his shoulder and tell him something simple and useful. Instead, I smoothed Noah's cowlick and tugged his bow tie straight. "You look sharp, buddy," I said, and he answered with a proud breath that pushed his ribs out like sails. The band softened. Servers began to float in the way good servers do when they want to be mistaken for air. Noah inched the wooden truck and set its wheels turning, one click, then another, as regular as a clock you wind because you like the sound. I reached for my glass of tea and sipped the cold. I looked at the groom, then the bride, then the river beyond, and I let the evening take its photograph of me, quiet, courteous, seated where I belonged. I told myself I would sit, smile, let the pictures happen, and remember Evelyn's advice without making a sermon of it. The room brightened by a shade that had nothing to do with light. It was the minute in a night when the gloss congeals and even pretty things admit they are only skins. I felt the grain under my shoe again and the brackish air find my lungs, and I promised the child beside me what I promise myself whenever water looks calm. I will look beneath the surface, and I will not apologize for what I find. The perfect Southern wedding cracks the second a 7-year-old tugs my sleeve and whispers, "Grandpa, check under the table." If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to point number 2. The band slipped into something bright and agreeable between courses, the kind of tune that makes glasses talk to each other. Noah's hand found my sleeve and held on with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 7-year-old. His eyes were too clear and his mouth made a small line like he was trying not to lose something he couldn't name. "Grandpa, don't eat anything with sesame," he whispered, and the way he said it wasn't a reminder. It was a warning. He leaned closer, breath warm as a secret. "Grandpa, did you look under the table?" The question slid through my collar like a draft from a door I was sure I'd shut. The skin along my scalp prickled. I lowered my chin once, the nod you give a child when you're about to do something quietly important, and eased the edge of linen up with 2 fingers. The ballroom's amber light pooled under there as if it too was curious. I saw chair legs, a rung polished by shoes, a dust bunny pretending to be a feather. Noah's dress shoes, black enough to bite the light, swung inward and went still. Lemon-scented cleaner rose from the floorboards. My hand paused, measuring hesitation the way you measure a cut, then slid forward until my knuckles brushed a paper's soft resistance. It was a quarter sheet, folded twice, edges greasy with a thumb's impatience. The paper had weight that didn't belong to decoration. I opened it with the care you use on a cracked plank, and the message stood there in block letters, all the softness wrung out. Table 5, add sesame to child's plate. The word that hooked me wasn't sesame, it was child. Not a name, not a table position, not guest. Child. I had written hundreds of notes to crews in my life, clear, short, pointed. This wasn't a kitchen mistake, this was an instruction. I slid the note into my inside jacket pocket, a simple chain of custody that made me breathe easier. My free hand found Noah's shoulder and settled there, a claim and a promise. I moved his plate an inch away from the aisle where servers flowed like a tide you had to time right. "Keep your truck on your lap," I said so soft that only his ear could catch it. His hands obeyed. The wooden wheels didn't click on linen anymore, which made the room sound louder. Across a low arrangement of magnolia leaves, Joe's eyes lifted and took me in. We had a signal we'd borrowed from shifts in shipyards. 2 fingers traced along the table's edge. She mirrored it with a tiny nod, stood and crossed to us without attracting a single camera. "Let's go see the view from the bridal suite," she said to Noah, voice steady and cheerful, the kind of calm that keeps hearts from beating themselves into trouble. He looked at me for permission. "I'll handle the food," I told him. "You handle the view." He squeezed my hand, small bones, sure as nails, then let Joe lead him out between chairs. I did not stand up and turn the night into a trial. I have learned that thunder can warn, but paperwork wins. I chose to observe before acting. I marked the exits, the closest staff station, the straightest path to the floor manager. I lifted my iced tea and took a slow sip, a man on a pleasant evening, and turned the menu tent to a neutral angle that gave me a better sightline without telegraphing fuss. The master of ceremonies chirped into the mic about taking our seats for the first course, and a laugh rolled through the room like a good rumor. Silver bells chimed. A server's tray flashed past bearing salads glossy with dressing, and my eye caught the dull shine of sesame scattered across a plate bound for our row. Seeds ride everything, spoons, cuffs, air. A careless hand could turn careful plates into accidents. A careful hand could make an accident look that way. I switched the place cards, Noah's with mine, so any plate meant for him would land in front of me. A small move, practiced like a drill. I turned my chair a degree, enough to intercept but not enough to warn. The paper in my pocket warmed against my ribs, a second heartbeat that beat slower than mine. I memorized the traffic pattern from kitchen to table, the path past the column, the pivot near the bandstand, the swing around the cake. In the corner, Mason, the floor manager, made a hand sweep in the direction of the service door, nothing extravagant, a current you'd miss unless you were piloting. Evelyn's old line, "Look beneath the surface," rose and set itself like a compass. I framed the night as a hull inspection. If one seam weeps, others think about it. With that in mind, fear shed its costume and turned into procedure. I folded the linen back into place, squared the corner, and lived in the pace I trust. Slow enough to see, fast enough to matter. Joe returned for a moment, angled to block me from the room while making it look accidental. "He's fine," she murmured, almost without moving her lips. "Big windows." I nodded. "Good, done." Her hand tapped twice on the table edge, a code for "I'm staying close," and then she was gone again, the chair scarcely noticing the absence of her weight. I stood with my tea, stretching a little, the kind of middle-aged movement that reads as maintenance. My route to Mason's podium would take me past the bar, then the head table, then a bank of votives that smelled faintly of vanilla pretending to be expensive. I didn't look at the bride. I didn't look at my son. I looked where responsibility lives, the place where decisions become instructions and instructions become action. Then I began to walk. A folded note in the dark. 5 words that could kill, turns my calm into a checklist and the room into evidence. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to point number 3. I moved with a casual man's pace and a working man's purpose, drifting from our table toward the podium where the floor manager kept his little command center. The iced tea in my hand was a prop that bought me time and made me look like I belonged. I picked out the earpiece before I saw the lapel pin. The tablet on the stand made the introduction for me. Mason Pike. Late 20s, good shoes for long nights, eyes that counted bodies faster than his mouth could greet them. I settled at the edge of his workflow so he would feel guided, not trapped. "Mind a quick safety check?" I said under the hum. He pivoted a quarter turn, clocked my age, my posture, the family atimtam. I reached into my inside pocket and produced the folded quarter sheet the way you lay a gauge against a seam. Oil smear on the corner, blunt black letters, no flourish at all. I kept my voice level, something between a weather report and a prayer. "Child at table 5 has a severe sesame and peanut allergy. This note was under our linen. I need a hold on anything with sesame heading our way." Small muscles tell the truth first. His eyes flicked to the kitchen door as if a timer was about to ding. His thumb worried the tablet cover. That single beat lag told me he recognized the handwriting, or the instruction, or the trouble. A guest from the bride's side handed that to me, he said, professional voice still attached. It looked like a routine special request. Name? I asked. He hesitated just long enough to make it a decision. Sloan Vale, the bride's younger sister. Then we start here, I said. Hold sesame for table 5. Pull and replace plateware and flatware for that row, and flag your expeditor as no sesame for our tickets. He breathed out, lifted his radio, and put the room on rails. Concise codes, a pause for confirmation, a nod that meant it was done. I turned from the console as a runner slipped by with salads, the sheen of dressing catching a dull glitter I didn't like. Sesame rides a kitchen like sawdust rides a shop, everywhere it can stick. I stepped back to our table for 30 seconds. Noah's place card switched with mine, utensils lined along the table's quiet side, napkin folded like a barricade. My phone buzzed. Joe. Window view secured. I texted back a single dot, then angled again for Mason's podium. Caleb found me before I found him. He slid an arm around my back the way a politician guides a donor, smile painted tight, teeth showing teamwork. Dad, let the hotel handle it, he murmured. No need to make a scene. I put the folded note in his palm. Color left his face a shade, then regrouped. It's a mix-up, he said. Don't embarrass Ariana. A runner passed again. I touched Mason's sleeve. Hold that salad, I said. He parked it on a side tray. I described the way stray seeds migrate, how a garnish becomes a hazard, how a plate set down and lifted can seed a whole table. I was not trying to win a debate, I was building a record. I opened my phone's voice memo and watched the seconds tick. For safety, I'm documenting, I said in my ordinary tone. Please state your name and role. He did. I asked for the banquet event order and the special dietary log. He tapped at the tablet, and I saw him measure the cost of transparency against the price of trouble. I asked for the duty manager. He radioed the banquet captain, then offered a professional apology that stayed clear of admission. Sloan arrived with the nervous energy of someone who hasn't decided which story she'll keep. Pale dress, phone clutched like a talisman, eyes hopping from my face to the head table and back. I handed the note, she said before I asked. I didn't read it. Oh. Who told you to deliver it? I asked. She pressed her lips together, glanced at the photographer working Ariana's side of the room, and said the name because the room was too full of witnesses to swallow it. Ariana. Mason's tablet chimed with a subtle notification. I leaned closer. Open your change log, I said. Show me who entered the special request. He hesitated long enough to make it theater, then brought up a screen with a timestamp and a field for the origin. It shows as entered yesterday, he said, quiet now, from assistant at hailboats.com. The address sat on the screen and grew teeth. Hailboats was a name that paid for this party more than the hotel did. The assistant was my son's assistant. House side fingerprints, not just the bride's. I slid the note into a clean envelope I'd pulled from my jacket, old habit, old trade, and handed Mason a pen. Initial and timestamp the seal, I said. He did. The banquet captain added hers. I photographed the note, the envelope, the contaminated salad, all with the event clock in frame. This was not drama. This was chain of custody. Mark table 5 no allergen in your POS, I said. Brief the expeditor and line cooks face-to-face right now. Remove any sesame bins from the plating line nearest our tickets. Assign one server to our table only. No runners. He took the list like it was a life ring. People with responsibility don't resent clarity. They resent blame. Caleb's hand closed around my forearm with more grip than sense. Give me the note back, he said, voice low. We'll fix it quietly. No, I said. This is liability and child safety. If we're stonewalled, I'll involve security and law enforcement. For now, we collect statements and logs. His jaw set along the hinge. A man can be brave in many wrong directions. I let his hand fall. Duty manager is on the way, Mason said. He looked smaller now that the room felt bigger. I told him we would need a written incident report, names, roles, times. I texted Joe. Hold Noah. Stay near elevator. Then I breathe like I do before a cut on a piece of wood that won't forgive a second pass. Across the ballroom, Ariana laughed into a camera, perfect and untroubled, and light flared on the lens. Caleb rubbed his jaw in the shadow of a column as if doing the math no groom wants to do. I centered my feet on the old floorboards, felt the hotel under me the way I've felt a deck under weather, and prepared to widen the circle. Documentation first, escalation next. The night had moved from hospitality to procedure, and I knew how to work there. When the audit log names a source and a sister admits the handoff, the wedding stops pretending. Do you want to hear who's on that screen? If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 3 below to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to point number 4. The hotel found us a small meeting room off the ballroom, a rectangle of thin carpet and citrus cleaner where the ice machine next door hummed like a distant hive. I took the chair with a view of the door and the hall that ran toward the kitchen. Mason set his tablet on the credenza, the radio clipped to his belt like a second spine. I laid my iced tea down and felt the cold ring it made on the laminate, a cheap halo around a night trying to keep its shape. Before anyone else arrived, I thumbed a message to Nora Kim. Found allergen note, sesame dusting observed, physical note secured, staff identified, filming and logging. Her reply arrived almost immediately, a lit fuse I could slip in my pocket. Document, get BEO plus special dietary log. Do not surrender original note. I tapped my recorder open again so the timestamp glowed like a lighthouse on the screen. Whatever else this became, it would be a record first. I announced the ground rules in the same tone I've used to start safety briefings at the yard. This is a child safety incident. I am seeking cooperation, not theater. Service to Table 5 pauses until controls are verified. The sealed envelope went on the table between us like a small, heavy truth. Mason nodded and turned to his tablet. The little printer coughed to life and spat out the banquet event order, then the special dietary log. Paper told a story the room had not wanted to hear. The BEO's base notes showed the allergy flagged correctly at booking, child, table 5, no peanuts or sesame, while the change log, time-stamped yesterday, carried a second instruction tagged from assistant at hailboats.com, plus add sesame garnish. Sloan came in holding her phone like it was the only solid thing. Her fingers were bloodless at the knuckles. She stood because sitting felt like confession. I captured her statement without leaning on it. She physically handed Mason the note, per Ariana, and did not read the content. The instant the words left her mouth, she looked like she wanted to gather them up and hide them under her dress. Truth has a way of feeling indecent in a room trained for appearances. The door clicked again, and Caleb slipped in mid-sentence, smile lacquered, eyes sanded down to polite. He closed the door behind him as if he could keep the night from escaping. He tried to make it sound like management, not pleading. His hand floated toward the envelope. I kept mine on it. He pivoted to image control, said we shouldn't blow this up, that it was a procedural hiccup, that he could clarify with staff if I would just hand him the note. I told him no and watched the refusal register, first in the cheek, then along the jaw, finally in the breath he didn't release. Ariana followed her light, posture perfect, voice measured to suggest competence, not care. She called it a misunderstanding, maybe a prank, and switched the lens to protect the venue talk, how we didn't want to harm the hotel's reputation, how food service teams are overtaxed. In all that polished consideration, I did not hear a question about Noah's condition. Omission is a kind of statement. It was the quietest thing said in the room and the loudest thing I heard. I repeated the safety demands on record. Halt sesame and peanut service to our row, swap any contaminated salads, remove sesame bins from the line nearest our tickets, assign a single server to table 5, brief the expeditor face to face. Mason radioed each step, received confirmations, then read back the actions so they lived in sound as well as ink. Progress scratches as it moves. The pushback came with practiced grace. Caleb stepped toward the recorder and suggested I was creating liability by documenting. Ariana softened the air between us with phrases that referenced my age without naming it. how tonight is a lot for everyone, how excitement could confuse perceptions. I have seen gaslighting done with a shout. This was done with satin. In the hospital, Joe would call it minimizing. At a yard, we call it sanding a crack until your palm stops feeling it. Caleb asked again for the paper. Ariana offered to handle it internally. I cited chain of custody and a grandfather's duty. My palm stayed on the envelope and did not move. The duty manager and banquet captain arrived together, gravity in suits, and took the pens the moment I offered them. They initialed the seal, wrote the incident start time, and agreed on record to pause service to Table 5 while controls were verified. The scratch of pen on paper felt like a line drawn where drift had started. I asked Mason to open the audit trail again and read the timestamp aloud. Entered 24 hours earlier from assistant at hailboats.com. That line put the house in the story, not just the bride's family. Caleb's jaw tightened at the hinge. Ariana's face stayed as composed as a still pond. I proposed a quiet, documented fix. We finished the dinner without allergens, then review camera and logs with management and counsel in the morning. Caleb balked. He wanted courses to move, photos to happen, the night to be what it had practiced. Ariana said cameras weren't necessary. The refusal told me the private path was narrowing to a ledge. Fine, widen the record. I requested security escort to the control room to tag the relevant camera feeds for preservation, a written incident report initiated now, and staff witness statements collected before end of shift. The duty manager nodded as if sliding beads on an abacus. We left the room together for a practical walk to the plating line, a small procession of authority. The air by the service doors carried steam and citrus and the metallic thrum of a machine that didn't care about weddings. We confirmed sesame bins were gone from the nearest line. I photographed the cleared station and the expeditor's screen flagging Table 5. No sesame peanuts, allergy child. The photo captured a cook's face in the corner. Alert, a little angry the way a good hand looks when someone has messed with a system that protects people. Joe's text tapped my palm. Staying in bridal lounge by elevator, Noah okay, hands clean, no shared snacks. Copy, I wrote back, then put the phone face down long enough to feel the floor under my shoes and the shape of the night in my chest. The room behind us may have been built for celebration, but the corridor we stood in was built for work. I preferred it. We returned to the meeting room for signatures and copies. Cooperation had gotten us to safe. It had not gotten us to honest. Caleb refused a full pause and told staff to keep the courses moving. A hotel can run two logics at once, guest service and safety, but a family can't. The soft approach had failed. I pocketed the phone and Nora's message stared at me from the lock screen like a verdict. If stonewalled, escalate. I lifted the envelope, straightened my tie, and angled back toward the ballroom. The record was ready. If the room wanted spectacle, it would get the truth instead. Behind a closed door, I demand chain of custody while they push for quiet. Which breaks first, the cover story or my patience? If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to point number 5. The corridor's work air let me go, and the ballroom's perfume took its place. I felt the sealed envelope ride my ribcage like a second sternum. The duty manager flanked my right, Mason my left. When the band slid toward a cadence, I stepped to the bandstand and spoke to the MC and the register men used to discuss weather on a dock. He read my face, cut the music on a downbeat, and placed the microphone in my hand as if it were a tool that could fix something. I kept my feet square on the old wood. My name is Richard Hale, I said, steady as a level. I'm the child's grandfather at Table 5. This is a safety announcement regarding a severe food allergy. Please pause eating at our table and the adjacent tables. Staff are holding service while the hotel verifies controls. The room inhaled and didn't finish the breath. Someone asked if the child was all right. He is safe and with a family nurse, I said. We are proceeding with caution. I lifted the sealed envelope chest high. A note reading, Table 5, add sesame to child's plate, was found under our linen. The original note is preserved. The hotel is retrieving back-end logs and camera footage to clarify its origin. We are not here for drama. We are here for procedure. The envelope caught the Edison bulbs and looked like a small lighthouse. Whispers crossed the floor like wind over reeds. A few phones tilted, then tilted down. The duty manager stepped to my side and spoke into the mic, voice trained and clean. He confirmed service to Table 5 was paused, line controls adjusted, and an incident report open. His presence moved the conversation from family to institution. From near the head table, Ariana's voice lifted in bright disbelief. "It must be a prank," she said, and then she softened it with concern for the venue's reputation. She never asked about Noah. The omission rang louder than the band had been playing. I asked Mason to identify who physically handed him the note. "Sloan Vale," he said, eyes briefly finding the young woman as if to share the weight. "She's cooperating," I added, before the room could decide to make a spectacle. Sloan nodded through a shine of tears, small and wrecked, and I felt the complicated pity you feel for a messenger who carried more than she understood. "Read the changelog timestamp and the origin field," I said to Mason. He brought the tablet to the mic. "Entered yesterday," he read, "from assistant at hailboats.com. The groom's side rippled, a visible calculation passing from face to face. Caleb's jaw worked at the hinge. I asked the manager to tag the relevant cameras for preservation. Security lifted a hand from the doorway. The band leader began a hush of chords to keep the room in one piece. I invited anyone near the service station or head table flank to speak with management after formal checks. Eyes went to the ceiling, to the floor, to their plates. No one wanted to be first. We pivoted to the control room while the band held the mood together with a soft vamp. Screens bloomed in a grid, the duty manager keyed in timestamps, and we watched the banquet corridor roll backward, then forward again. In the left pane, Caleb appeared in profile, a folded note in his hand. He placed it into Sloane's palm. She moved down the corridor toward the service station where Mason would later stand. Seconds later, another camera caught Ariana gesturing toward our side of the room while speaking to a bridesmaid. Her hand traced a diagonal that pointed unmistakably to Table 5. Ariana's defenders would later call it a seating card. "Zoom," I said. The operator stepped through frames until the marker bleed came into focus. Table 5 in bold script consistent with the recovered note. The room inside the room got smaller. The manager flipped through the event packet he'd brought to align names and stations. A prenuptial annex was tucked inside for VIP coordination. Hotels do more than flowers for certain parties. A clause on a clean white page noted that if Noah were no longer a primary dependent, the Hale family trust structure could be revised. Paperwork has a way of describing what people are not yet brave enough to say aloud. We went back to the floor. I returned to the mic and summarized cleanly. The note exists and is preserved. Sloan physically delivered it. The audit trail shows an entry yesterday from assistant at hailboats.com. CCTV shows Caleb handing a folded note to Sloan. Hotel security is preserving all media. "We presume innocence while we assemble facts," I said, "but we will keep the pause in place." Caleb stepped forward into the wash of stage light. "It's a seating miscommunication," he said, and the word miscommunication wobbled like a board with a knot in it. "In this now, Dad." I kept my eyes on the line between us. "We finished the safety checks," I said. "Child safety and proper documentation aren't negotiable." An elder on Ariana's side, silver hair, the weight of a godparent, lifted a hand. "Let the man speak." The room obeyed him like a bell. I set two boundaries in a voice that knew how to set them. First, no food to Table 5 until the manager lifts the hold. Second, we will finish the evening without sesame or peanut exposure. Anyone uncomfortable may step into the foyer. I added the simple legal posture that keeps nights like this honest. In the morning, I'll deliver the note and copied logs to counsel. If what we've documented rises to criminal endangerment, I will ask for law enforcement review. This is not a threat. It is a path. Ariana stood very still, the kind of stillness that tries to read a changing script. Caleb rubbed his jaw, eyes bracketing the cameras as if he could will them shut. Near the door, Joe stood in the half-light with Noah's hand in hers, small fingers safe against a nurse's pulse. The band's music thinned to the edge of silence. Denial had met evidence. The next step would require a choice, and it would be made in the open. Silence settled like sawdust after a cut. The band's vamp thinned to a thread that only held the room together out of habit, and for a beat the wedding forgot how to be a wedding. I felt the moment the way I feel a hull take a load. No drama, just the math of stress through wood. Ceremony had carried us as far as it could. What came next belonged to law and to the smallest person in the building. I drew a breath that found the bottom of my ribs and let it out slow. The sealed envelope thumped lightly against my sternum when I turned, a pocket metronome keeping time with resolve. I stepped 2 paces off the mic so I would not make theater of what needed doing and lifted my phone. The recorder was already counting seconds. My thumb hovered only long enough to register that there would be no clean way back, and then I dialed. When the dispatcher answered, I kept my voice as even as reading a shipping manifest. I reported a suspected attempted poisoning and endangerment of a minor at the hotel ballroom, noted the recovered note instructing add sesame to child's plate, the audit log indicating an entry from assistant at hailboats.com, and CCTV that appeared to show the handoff sequence. I requested officers to take statements and secure evidence. Yes, the child is safe, I said. Yes, we have the original note sealed. I gave my name, the room, the hotel address. The call ended without ceremony, as all right choices do. I turned to the duty manager and kept things equally plain. Officers were en route. Security needed to preserve ingress and egress near the head table and the service corridor. No one should leave those immediate zones until spoken with by management or security. He nodded and spoke into his radio. The air around us tightened into order. I texted Joe. Move from bridal lounge to family restroom by elevator. Locked door, hand wash, no shared surfaces. A single word arrived back. Done. I saved the timestamp. The image of Noah with his wooden truck flickered through my head like a lantern. It steadied me more than the iced tea had. Ariana crossed the floor with a smile that behaved like paint and stopped at what she must have measured as the right distance. You're overblowing this and humiliating everyone, she said softly enough to pretend privacy. Her hand moved toward my forearm, toward the phone. Mason slid into the space between us without touching either one of us, the precise choreography of a professional who knows when presence counts as policy. Ariana's eyes flared. Small, quick, there, and gone. Caleb arrived a half step later, voice pitched for his father, not the room. Let's take this offline, Dad. We'll resume the courses and talk tomorrow. The last word frayed. I didn't raise mine. The chain of custody is in motion, I said. I owe the child, not the optics. He looked past me as if the cameras were a weather front that might change course. With the manager, I moved to the side table and slid the sealed envelope into a larger evidence bag the hotel security provided. We initialed and time-stamped the new seal. The banquet captain photographed the bag beside the event clock and then photographed my ID. I spoke for the recorder. Originals will be handed to responding officers upon arrival. A runner set the earlier held salad on a tray labeled Potential Exhibit A, and the captain added time and initials with a pen that sounded louder than it should have. Security placed stanchions by the service corridor and posted a server like a lighthouse at the head table flank. The duty manager instructed staff not to bus plates from Table 5 or the adjacent tables until cleared. In the low alcove near the bar, I asked Sloan to wait with the banquet captain. She nodded, wrung out but present. The manager took down names and numbers for any guest who had sat along the path from head table to service station to Table 5. The list began to look like a map of currents. I returned to the bandstand just long enough to say what needed saying. Officers have been requested, I told the room. The hold on Table 5 remains. Please continue your conversations. The band will provide background. I put the weight on safety and clarity, not accusation. Weddings can tolerate the truth better when it's dressed like procedure. Caleb tried one more time in public where private had failed. He's my father. Let him end this, he said, aiming his plea at the room. I gave him the only answer that mattered. Loyalty to a child outranks loyalty to anyone's comfort. The sentence hung there between us, clean and square, and it did not ask for agreement. Ariana's optics developed a hairline crack, nail-tapping her glass stem, a small hitch in breath, a scan of exits as if they might have multiplied. She pulled a bridesmaid into a whisper that looked like strategy more than solace. I noted it and kept my face as uninteresting as a ledger. The duty manager briefed me on the packet prepared for the handoff. Printed BEO and special dietary log, audit trail screenshot with timestamp and origin, stills from CCTV showing the hallway sequence, list of staff statements begun. 2 USB drives would be burned, one for the officers, one retained for hotel counsel. He used the phrase preserve chain 3 times. I heard gratitude in it, the kind the competent feel when someone else is willing to be the adult in the room. My phone hummed. Joe, can he keep his truck? Yes, I wrote back, I'll come soon. The words moved something in me that paperwork can't reach. Duty can be dry. The child at the center keeps it from calcifying. I took a breath and closed the circle inside. The line had been crossed, and there would be no uncrossing it into a pretty photo. Whispers, phones, judgment, they were the cost of a record that would protect Noah and every child who might sit at a table here after us. I had spent a career choosing between finish and strength. Tonight, I chose strength. The band's soft chords strained against a thread of sound from the street, a Doppler that braided itself into the music and then separated out, unmistakable. Heads raised like boats sensing a shift. Security adjusted their stance. I pressed 2 fingers to the evidence bag, not superstitious, just present, and looked toward the elevator bank where Joe waited behind a locked door with a boy who trusted me to be a man. The ballroom doors eased open. Hotel security stepped aside to let the first officers enter, faces set to neutral, notebooks already in hand. The duty manager gestured toward our cluster, the bandstand, the stanchions, the tray-marked Exhibit A. I squared my feet on the old floor, felt it answer back, and stepped forward to begin the formal process that would redraw our family. The officers arrived with the quiet competence of people who spend their lives stepping into rooms that don't know what to do next. The duty manager met them at the door, and we walked together to the bandstand where the stanchions made a temporary harbor. I handed over the evidence bag with the sealed note and the tray marked Potential Exhibit A. Gloves, forms, property receipt stickers. Everything clicked into place with the sound of a stapler. I set my driver's license on the linen, spelled my name once, then again for the report, and watched timestamps become anchors. My statement went down in a straight line. The whisper from Noah, the lift of the linen, the paper and its smear, the audit trail with the assistant email, the CCTV handoff, the actions to pause service and clear the line. One officer wrote, the other asked clean questions that made the record stronger. I requested a copy of the incident report when available and asked the hotel to put a retention hold on all CCTV and POS logs. The duty manager confirmed with a nod and a line on his own clipboard. I felt the first breath of relief that comes when procedure outruns chaos. Interviews split the room like creeks feeding a river. Mason described the note and the back-end log, voice clipped, hands steady now that someone official had the wheel. Sloan repeated that she had handed the note per Ariana and that she hadn't read it. The officer let the silence sit long enough to make the words complete. The duty manager witnessed each signature. The envelope was already a thing in the past tense. Its absence on my chest felt like a pulled tooth my tongue could not stop checking. Caleb and Ariana offered their versions in a careful duet. He called it seeding confusion. She said it must be a malicious prank. Neither asked about Noah. The officers' faces didn't move. Mine didn't either. I learned long ago that editorializing is how you lose a jury you haven't met yet. I asked whether an officer could perform a brief welfare check for the report. We rode the elevator to the family restroom near the bank. Joe unlocked, eyes level. Noah sat on the counter with his wooden truck, cheeks pink, breathing easy. The officer noted, child appears safe, no symptoms, thanked Joe, and we locked the door again. The ballroom exhaled into low conversation. The band kept a soft layer of music, the kind you can decide not to hear. Some guests drifted to the foyer. The hotel sent out little plates of non-allergen snacks to the adjacent tables. I could feel the social cost rack up. Stares that wanted a villain, pity that didn't know where to land, judgment that didn't need facts. It didn't change the math. Safety first, record second, feelings a distant third. In a quiet corner between two columns, I called Nora. I gave her the case number, the thumbnail of what the officers had. She told me to send written notice tonight to freeze any trust or ownership changes and to request an IT litigation hold on Hale Boat's email accounts. I'm drafting a civil complaint, she said. Endangerment and IIED will manage defamation exposure by sticking to filings. While we spoke, a message popped at her end. A friendly paralegal had flagged an email thread between Caleb and a family therapist about pursuing a capacity evaluation of me to shift trusteeship. Nora's voice flattened. That's exploitation evidence, she said. It pairs with the prenup annex. We moved immediately. She secured an early morning slot for an independent neurocognitive assessment. I wrote the time and address in my notes app and set 2 alarms. Then I called our corporate attorney to convene an emergency board vote. Suspend Caleb's signing authority, require dual signatures for any trust or equity transactions until further notice. The resolution pinged to directors by DocuSign within minutes. Procedure can move fast when it knows where it's going. Back at the bandstand, the duty manager handed me a receipt for the items surrendered. 2 USB sticks, one for police, one for hotel counsel, were labeled and bagged. I kept photocopies of the banquet event order, the dietary log, and the audit screenshot. The officers took the originals and read me the property receipt numbers. A cousin intercepted me to say I had ruined the wedding. Another relative touched my sleeve and whispered thank you. I gave the same sentence to both. I protected a child and the staff who feed children. It felt like a thesis I could stand on. I asked Caleb if he wanted to see Noah with an officer present. His jaw worked. Not now, he said. This can still be truth before it becomes court, I offered, flat without venom. He didn't answer. Security, citing venue policy during an open inquiry, escorted Ariana and Sloan to a side office to complete statements. The shine left Ariana's posture by degrees. Sloan looked grateful to be somewhere someone would tell her what to do. We left by the elevator bank, Joe's hand on Noah's shoulder, my hand on the top of the truck so it wouldn't fall. The hotel validated parking and slid me a small card with the incident number. Charleston's streets were washed in sodium light that made the marsh grass look theatrical. The car was too quiet, the kind that lets you hear your own decisions. At home, normalcy did its honest work. Joe ran a bath cloth over Noah's hands, checked his EpiPen, set pajamas by the bed. I made cocoa that couldn't hurt a soul, set a chair outside his room, and listened to the house settle. The wooden truck went on the windowsill like a small lighthouse. My phone buzzed. Nora had forwarded the email thread. Caleb and the therapist strategizing to paint me cognitively diminished. Timelines lined up with the prenup annex and the event change log. The dual-track manipulation was no longer a theory. It was text. I wrote 4 notices and sent them before my resolve could cool. To the Hale Boats Board to confirm the authority freeze, to Trust Council to place a hold on amendments, to our family office IT to preserve emails and drives for Caleb and his assistant, to the hotel to formalize the preservation letter already in practice. Nora texted back a checkmark and a line. You're ahead of them now. I put the neurocognitive appointment on the fridge calendar like it was any other errand and messaged Nora final confirmations. My public line for any inquiries would fit in a teacup. Child safety and facts. We trust the process. I took my chair by the window and watched the river carry the dock light in a thin, broken ribbon. Good work, I told Joe. Sleep, she said, touching my shoulder once on her way down the hall. I sat with the night until it thinned. The law, the child, the record, those were the parts that would hold. Tomorrow, the lawsuit would begin to say what tonight had proved. Morning remade the house in clean light, as if it wanted to take inventory of what we had left. Joe brewed coffee that smelled like order. Noah padded in with his wooden truck and sat at the counter, solemn in the way children are solemn when they've seen adults become complicated. I checked his EpiPen, checked the calendar, put the neurocognitive appointment at the top like a ship's manifest. The night's heat had burned away, leaving the work. The clinic sat in a low brick building by the medical university, all efficiency and fluorescent honesty. I signed forms with a hand that didn't shake. The examiner, gray suit, careful eyes, walked me through tasks that felt like sanding blocks for the brain. Lists, shapes, a story to hold and repeat without dropping a detail. I treated it like carpentry, accuracy over speed, no heroics. When it ended, he said results would be compiled same day for counsel. I walked out into the light with a relief I hadn't budgeted for. Aging is not surrender, it is maintenance. Back home, Nora turned our dining table into a war room, laptops, yellow pads, a printed timeline pinned to painter's tape on the wall. We built the complaint the way I build a hull, ribs first. Count 1, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Count 2, negligence and reckless endangerment. A prayer for relief that asked for more than money, corrective actions, apologies in the record, training commitments that would outlast the news cycle. She flagged the evidence we had and circled the gaps as if they were knots in a plank. "We let the filings speak," she said. I nodded. I've always trusted lumber that doesn't brag. The hotel's general manager joined by video, tie loosened, voice steady. We didn't need enemies we didn't have. He confirmed their preservation of CCTV and POS logs, their cooperation with police, and laid out the protocol upgrades already underway. Separate plating lanes, color-coded allergen flags, a designated safety officer on duty for large events. I thanked him for moving fast and asked for one more thing, a training where families could sit in and ask questions that make chefs rethink garnish as hazard. He said yes before I finished the sentence. Joe and I drafted a family safety plan that fit on 2 laminated sheets. One for home, emergency contacts, EpiPen locations, a note authorizing any adult caring for Noah to call 911 without hesitation. One for the world, a card Noah could hand to any server that said child, severe sesame/peanut allergy, no cross-contact, no exceptions. We taped one to the fridge and slid one into Noah's backpack. Practical paper turns fear into something you can hold without burning your hand. At lunch, Noah poked at apple slices with the concentration of a jeweler. "Are we still going to the park?" he asked. "We are," I said. "Truck 2? Truck 2. That was the day's quota of talking about the wedding for both of us. Sometimes repair is measured in short answers that land like promises. In the afternoon, Nora's paralegal dropped by with a portable scanner and a box of labels. We built the evidence set like a kit. The property receipt copies, stills from the CCTV frames, screenshots of the audit trail with the assistant email highlighted, a transcript of Sloan's statement as recorded by the officer, the BEO and the dietary log with the late change circled in red pencil. Each piece earned a tab and a date, each tab a place in the outline. It felt less like anger and more like carpentry. Fit it true, and it will carry weight. The neurocognitive report arrived before dinner time. Intact across domains, mild age typical variability, no deficits. Nora forwarded it to corporate counsel and trust counsel with a cover note that sounded like a hammer setting the last nail. That lane closed. The corporate attorney followed with a board vote confirmation. Caleb's signing authority suspended, dual signatures now policy, interim CFO oversight in effect. Payroll would not notice the drama. That's how you know governance is working. The first reporter called just after 6, somehow already softening the facts into something palatable. I gave the only sentence I had permission to give. Child safety and facts. We trust the process. Then I hung up and turned off the ringer. I kept my face turned toward the work I recognized. Checking door locks, labeling a new set of kitchen containers, rinsing sesame from a spice rack that had never meant harm, and now understood it could. We ate early and walked to the park as the sky traded heat for color. Joe pushed Noah on the swing until the chain sang a little. A boy's laughter nearby ran on a different story, and for once I didn't mind that ours was heavier. I sat on a bench and practiced the speech I might have to give the next time a room pretended that garnish was decoration and not a decision. Hold service, I murmured to no one. Document that. The words felt better in the mouth than anger does. After bedtime, I stood with Nora on the porch while the river traded day for a cooler breath. She reviewed next steps like a navigator reading a chart. File the complaint first thing, serve process the week after, schedule depositions cleanly, avoid spectacle, win on the paper. We're not hunting headlines, I said, we're building a record. She smiled without softness. Exactly. Before sleep, I sent 3 messages. To the hotel confirming the family training date. To Noah's school nurse with the updated allergy card and emergency contacts. To the board with the neurocognitive summary attached, a reminder that rumors die when you feed them documents. Then I opened the tin box under the kitchen table and touched the copy of the note and the receipt. Vigilance is a habit you keep with your hands. The house learned quiet. Joe washed 2 cups. I set the wooden truck on the windowsill where it could catch first light in the morning. The night before had been spectacle. This day had been craft. Between the two, a path. Not clean, not quick, but load-bearing. Tomorrow would move us toward court. Tonight had moved us toward each other. 3 months can turn a crisis into paperwork and a prayer into a process. The river had cooled to the color of pewter by the time we stood under the courthouse's high windows, and the breeze off the marsh carried that clean, metallic promise you hear in rigging before a storm passes. I signed my name at a small counter where the clerk slid case numbers like tickets, then followed Nora down a corridor that smelled faintly of toner and floor wax. The emergency had become calendars, hearings, and the steady arithmetic of consequence. On the criminal track, Ariana stood with her lawyer and took a negotiated plea to a lesser endangerment count. Conditions stacked neatly: cooperation with investigators, no contact with Noah, completion of an allergen safety course, community service hours that would benefit families. The judge entered a protective order and spoke in a tone that made the room smaller. Sloan, pale but steady, received limited immunity for early cooperation and truthful statements. She wept into a tissue that looked heavier than it was. None of it felt triumphant. It felt precise. Civil moved like a barge, slow, inevitable. We settled for damages covering emotional distress and legal fees, plus a formal apology read into the record. I never needed her contrition. I needed the words preserved. When the funds cleared, I signed the wire to the Evelyn Maritime Scholarship and felt something loosen. Not in relief exactly, but in alignment. Harm turned into tuition for kids who wanted to learn how wood floats and why a boat is a promise you make to water. At the yard, emergency measures hardened into governance. The board ratified the temporary resolutions as permanent. Caleb's signing authority removed, dual signatures required on trust and equity transactions. An independent CFO added oversight no one would resent. The minutes recorded the vote in polite language that covered a hard truth. Transparency had replaced brittle control. Payroll met Fridays. Vendors were paid without artifice. Pine pitch and mallet taps took back the soundtrack from my phone's alert chimes. Family court trimmed its paper to fit the child it serves. The parenting plan set supervised visitation for Caleb until he completed parenting classes and therapy, with allergen safety training as a non-negotiable. Noah's mother's custodial rights were reinforced. Joe's name appeared in black letters as an approved supervisor, and I felt the rightness of it down in my grip. The plan didn't punish, it built a fence. Digital discovery did what it does when you ask the right way. The IT hold yielded emails that mapped the capacity evaluation scheme, threads that made the prenup annex and the banquet change log rhyme. I completed the independent neurocognitive assessment Nora had arranged, an orderly morning of tasks and questions whose outcome was dull and beautiful, intact. We circulated the report to the board and the court. That lane went from an open road to a dead end with a chain across it. The hotel issued a sober statement on enhanced allergen protocols, training updates, plating line separations, a named officer on duty at large events. I sent a short note commending their cooperation. A trade group picked up our case as a best practices memo. I did not enjoy the attention. I took the satisfaction of knowing some other grandfather would have an easier time saying the word hold into a microphone. In a courthouse hallway, I crossed paths with my son. The air tasted like old paper. He looked smaller than I remembered him. I kept my voice level. Truth first, then repair. He stared past my shoulder at a bulletin board crowded with flyers and didn't answer. A clean silence can be a bridge, a defensive one is a wall. I left him both. Noah's return to childhood arrived in pieces. The kite Joe found at a pharmacy arced out over the marsh on a Saturday when the cordgrass rustled like starched linen. The wooden truck waited on the porch rail, sun-warmed, ready for whichever game needed wheels. We checked labels without fear, carried an EpiPen as naturally as a wallet, and watched gulls arguing with their shadows. Safety had become routine, not a religion. Work took its own breath again. In the shop, a new skiff's ribs rose in a disciplined ribcage, steam still curling from a plank we bent to the jig. I signed paychecks under the dual signature rule with the CFO beside me, and we talked through cash flow like grown men who trust each other. I never liked pretending strength by hiding numbers. Comfortable transparency makes better timber. At home, I took the police copy of the original note and the property receipt and slid both into a small tin box. I screwed the box's flanges under the kitchen table where my hand could find it like an old prayer. Look beneath the surface. Build your life so it remembers. On the windowsill, the wooden truck kept its post as a vigil lamp. Two modest artifacts, two directions to the same habit. Pay attention. I kept our public lines short and clean. Child safety and facts guided our actions. We trust the process. I turned down the show that wanted confrontation and sat quietly in the back row of one hotel training, answering two questions and leaving before the applause could confuse anyone's motives. It isn't my job to be a symbol. It's my job to keep promise and process within arm's reach. Something in me had shifted and stayed shifted. I had been a father who swallowed discomfort for appearances. I had become a man who chooses boundaries over approval, even when the cost is cold shoulders in a warm room. I did not sermonize about it. I sanded the thought smooth and set it on the shelf where I keep the tools I use every day. Evening found the river polished by a wind that had somewhere else to be. Joe laughed with Noah as the kite reeled in, and I rested my palm under the table until my fingers found the tin box. We looked beneath the surface, I told Noah later, tucking him in while the last light shook itself out of the trees. It's our rule. He nodded the solemn nod of children who plan to outgrow you but carry your sentences anyway. The dock light threw a long ribbon across the water, thin and unbroken. I let the house learn the sound of quiet that belongs to finished work. I am not a man for speeches. I close my shop the way I close a day. Tools cleaned, bench cleared, one quiet look at the work I mean to continue tomorrow. If this story has a lesson worth writing down, it isn't made of thunder. It's made of the simple rules that held when the room tilted. The first rule belongs to Evelyn, and now it belongs to us. Look beneath the surface. She said it the way a harbor bell speaks in fog. Steady, never urgent, always true. That night, Noah lent the rule a child's voice. Check under the table, he whispered, and a family's future pivoted on 8 small words. The maxim moved from a private mantra to a household law, and I keep it as carefully as I keep my licenses. Examined, current, ready to be shown. A hierarchy followed, and once I named it, life became less confusing. Child safety first, law and record next. Feelings and optics last. I had lived the other way around for years, polishing appearances while small cracks took water. The new order demanded different muscles. Say hold into a microphone, ask for logs without apology, keep your voice even while your heart rose hard. It isn't natural the first time. It becomes natural the third. Boundaries did not make me colder. They made me reliable. I used to swallow discomfort to keep peace. All that ever bought me was longer silences and a brittle calm. Now I choose lines I can defend at 2 in the morning. I don't hand evidence to relatives. I don't postpone safety for photographs. I won't be shamed out of calling 911 when a child is at risk. Approval has its place, but it does not steer my boat anymore. Boundaries do, and they get us home. Betrayal taught me something tidy and unsentimental. Blood is not a credential. Behavior is. Ambition can dress itself in family colors and still strip a house. The response isn't bitterness. The response is standards that are written down and enforced without heat. You can love a person while refusing to finance their ruin. You can remember who someone was without letting that memory manage who they are. I used to think revenge meant noise. Then the calendar taught me better. The cleanest revenge is due process, documentation, chain of custody, court orders that fit like dovetails, governance reforms that stand when tempers fall. Anger blows hot and leaves you empty. Procedure moves slow and leaves you safer. We chose the second path, and it is held. Mercy belongs in the same room as truth, but not in its chair. If confession ever arrives, voluntary, complete, with reparations that cost the giver more than they cost the receiver, I will answer it. Forgiveness does not precede safety, and it does not erase the receipt. Mercy without consequences is only sentimentality, and sentimentality cannot watch a child. Noah gets a shorter version of all this. Ask questions. Keep your EpiPen near your body, not your backpack. Tell an adult when something feels wrong. Bravery is sometimes a whisper and a tug on a sleeve. The world will try to confuse him with charm and noise. I want his ear tuned to quieter instruments, the scratch of a pen on a report, the click of a case closing, the sound a boundary makes when it holds. Aging has its own instruction manual, and I am reading it with a pencil in hand. Agency isn't youth's property. I will test my capacity when challenged, keep paperwork current, and refuse to be managed by secrecy. I will write down my wishes and tell the people who might need to know them. If someone tries to make me smaller for convenience, they will meet a file folder, not a shrug. The ripples beyond our door mattered. The hotel strengthened protocols, and a trade memo carried our night into other ballrooms. I kept our public line brief, child safety and facts. We trust the process and let filing speak. Being useful beats being famous. When asked to sit quietly in the back of a training and answer 2 questions, I did, then went home before anyone mistook attention for work. Objects help me keep vows. Under our kitchen table, there's a tin box that holds a police copy of a note and a property receipt. On the windowsill, there's a wooden truck that has learned the shape of a boy's hands. Vigilance, care, procedure, love. You can touch them both before you leave the house, and you remember which one you will need today. If you're reading this with a few more winters on your shoulders than you meant to have, here is an invitation, not a sermon. Write a safety-first plan for your family. Medication lists, allergy cards, emergency contacts, consent to call 911, and put it where a teenager can find it. Rehearse saying hold and please document that without making your throat burn. Teach the youngest person in your house how to ask a question that interrupts danger. Practice being calm the way other folks practice piano. No false endings here. Caleb's work is ahead of him, not behind. Hope is available to anyone who wants it. Trust is earned one plain act at a time. I will measure him by deeds and patience, not by speeches. If he brings truth, the door opens. If he brings performance, the door stays shut. That isn't punishment, that's carpentry. Night settles the house and gives the river back its mirror. Joe washes 2 mugs in a rhythm that sounds like an old song. Noah sleeps with one hand open as if the world might return something it forgot to give him. I rest my palm under the kitchen table until it finds the tin box. The metal is cool, the promise warm. We keep looking beneath the surface, and we act when we find something. In the end, what endures isn't the noise of a single night, but the quiet discipline that follows it. Safety comes first, even when it costs applause. Truth is patient, written in logs and signatures, not in rumors. Boundaries, set without rage, kept without apology, are a form of love that outlasts charm. We learn to look beneath the surface, choose procedure over performance, and turn harm into something useful. Better rules, clearer habits, a steadier way of caring for one another. Justice here isn't spectacle. It's due process that protects the smallest among us and reminds the rest that integrity is measurable. No ending ties every thread, but a good ending points forward. Practice vigilance, honor facts, and let actions, not optics, define who we are. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it resonated, share one thought in the comments about a boundary you plan to keep. And if you'd like more stories of resilience and hard-won clarity, please follow the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us for what comes next.